Fighting Fury, we're from Tigerland. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I didn't think I'd be busting the scarf out early, but we fucking won. What is going on, YouTube universe? My name is Trent. Some of you guys at home might know me as Zirra for other content I throw out into the YouTube universe, and welcome to the Hip and Shoulder, the channel where we discuss everything Australian rules football. And it is that time once again, ladies and gentlemen. Another round of AFL action is in the books, so it is officially time for the round 1 recap. And holy shit, did we see a round of upsets and absolute fucking onslaughts. The round opened up with Thursday night football. Let me paint the scene for you. Richmond, as we all know, has just gone through a huge exodus. We lost the likes of Dylan Grimes, Marlon Pickett, but most importantly, Dustin Martin through retirement. We then had Shea Bolton, Daniel Rioli, Jack Graham, Liam Baker, everybody lining up to jump ship and go elsewhere. And it was on the back of a wooden spoon year in 2024. We hit the draft period hard. Obviously, the trade period didn't yield much result for us in the way of bringing talent in. But the young kids that we got all have promise. Sam Lawler, number 1 pick, speaks for himself. Josh Smiley was there next. We ended up picking up the likes of Taj Houghton, who before doing his ACL was probably a top 5 prospect. We got Harry Armstrong, Jonty Fall, Luke Traynor. We picked up some incredible talent, and it was going to be a roller coaster ride. We weren't expecting much going into the year. Myself, as a Richmond man, only expected to see young kids get blooded early and get opportunity and take that opportunity. See where some senior players are at in the way of whether they want to still push for selection, whether they're going to accept mediocrity, whether they're going to fall into being complacent. But we have had a very strong pre-season. You know, the likes of Nick Vlosten, Tim Taranto, Nathan Broad, getting around this younger core, really building an inner belief within our club. We were not expected to win a game all year by many media experts, and coming up against a Carlton who, although are missing the likes of Nick Newman and Charlie Curnow, we were expected by many to lose this in an absolute avalanche. Some people saying that if Carlton didn't win by at least a minimum of 10 goals, they were doing themselves a disservice. And at one point, it looked like we were looking down the barrel of that outcome. Richmond were 41 points down, and I was starting to get a little bit worried. I am not a fan that leaves the game early. I'm not a fan that turns the game off early if I'm watching on the TV, but it was getting ugly, and I thought I was going to be in for hell on earth. I was really going to be tuning into something that I didn't want to see go down. And then something clicked, and the young kids started rallying, and the older, more experienced heads started getting behind those young kids. That sounded wrong. I fucking apologize for that. But belief started building, and the wave of momentum started swaying the way of Richmond, and it was on the back of forcing Carlton to, have forced errors, spilling easy chess marks, kicking the ball directly back to us. Not just actual pressure, as I pressure myself into speaking incorrectly, but it was perceived pressure that was also getting us over the line. We haven't seen Richmond, I feel, pressure a team like this since 2019, 2020, when we went back-to-back for the Flags. It was so incredibly great to watch, and a 41-point deficit ended up spinning full circle into a 13-point Richmond win. We have already surpassed expectations by many by picking up our first win of the season in round 1. And I couldn't even be more happier, because I went on a limb in my footy tipping, if you follow my footy tipping here on this channel, and I actually tipped Richmond to win by 13 points. So to get not just the win, but to tip the margin, over the fucking moon. And it was just great to see that this win came off of a collective effort. You had your senior players rallying and, you know, doing their thing, but the younger kids took opportunity. Seth Campbell, Sam Lawler, who not only put in a great performance for his debut game, ended up winning the Rising Star nomination for round 1. Harry Armstrong showed a lot of physicality in the game. Luke Traynor looks like he's been playing football for years. He was so poised off of that half-back line. Jack Ross is a little bit more aged than some of these teenage players, but he showed us an outing that makes me feel he's going to have a breakout year this year. He was huge. He was arguably best on ground, at least for Richmond. It wasn't without effort from Carlton. Patrick Cripps put in a huge effort. I thought Tom de Koning was influential in the ruck. Some people say Toby Nankervis was better. I feel Toby maybe in parts were better, given that he won the hit-outs and he kicked a couple of goals, you know, so he added to the tally. But I thought Sam de Koning, as the game went on, started getting the better of him when it come to the one-on-one rucking duel. Nankervis around the ground, obviously a lot better with his intercept marking in defence, but it was a battle to behold, and he definitely needs to get his just desserts, Tom de Koning, because I feel coming up against Nankervis on his own, when Carlton in the past have been a 2-ruck lineup, you know, with having Mark Pittonet in there, it's not often that we see TDK on his own for too long of a stretch, if that makes sense. So Carlton had people putting effort in, but it was mistakes from people like Mitch McGovern, Nick Haynes, Cowan in defence, Motlop shit the bed a little bit whenever he got the ball. So there was a lot of experienced players for Carlton really letting them down, especially defensively. That's where this whole thing broke down, because they were fit around the ground everywhere else. Players like Harry Mackay should have torn this Richmond defence apart, but the combination of Jacob Blight, who was only playing his 4th AFL game in the first half, and Ben Miller in the second half, kept him to 1 goal for the game, which I think, again, was influential, because this bloke should have kicked 4, 5, 6 goals quite comfortably. If Charlie Curnow had played, I don't think Richmond win, because they were able to contain 1. I feel they wouldn't have been able to contain 2, especially when Jacob Blight went down. So we could probably count our blessings that they had that injury, but I'm not making excuses for Carlton. This is a game where they should have buried us with the team they had. We get up and win, and I feel this is dangerous for anybody backing against Richmond moving forward, because Richmond have shown in the past momentum is a powerful thing. Self-belief is a powerful thing. They now have both. Rolling forward, this could be dangerous. They could pick up another win this week, and if they did, I'd be fucking over the moon, let me tell you what. But Thursday night, great game of football to watch, and a lot of people were questioning whether Richmond and Carlton should be opening up anymore because Richmond's dropped off. But Richmond climbed back up. So fuck you guys. This is where I would normally cut into, you know, individual player performances and choosing my 3-2-1 votes and man of the match and stuff like that. But I'm thinking what we're going to do from now on in this format is we're just going to talk about the games first, then talk about all the players collectively through each game at the end, before revealing not only who I think was best on ground for each game, but I'm going to start doing something a little bit different. We're going to start doing the hip and shoulder team of the week, and I'm going to start compiling, you know, a full team of players, because there could be some players that miss out on votes, but played particularly well enough to be within my team of the week in a certain position. So I think it's just another way to dive into my passion for the game, another conversation point for me and you to have at home. So stay tuned for the end of the video to see how all that goes down. So we're going to move on from Thursday night football to Friday night football, which saw, again, a great matchup. Hawthorn, Essendon, MCG. Hawthorn coming off of a win against Sydney the week prior, and we have Essendon, who was slated to play a game that earlier week, but obviously with the tornado cyclone action that was going on in Queensland, we got that reprimand and that relocation to the end of the season. This was always going to be, I feel, a great contest, even though I was going into this game quite comfortably thinking Hawthorn were going to win it, especially seeing how they played against Sydney the week before. This was a game that I was expecting Essendon to rise to the occasion. However, this is also a talking point that a lot of people are now taking to social media, because apart from Sydney losing to Brisbane this week, I believe every team that played in round 0, well, there's only 4 teams that played in round 0, so you can't really mark that right. But anyway, both teams that won the week prior won the following week. So people are now suggesting, did that extra game aid them with match fitness and that kind of stuff. You could argue against that given some of the outcomes that we have had in this game compared to how teams performed the week prior. But again, could have that week given those teams that underperformed the first week but then came out and played better this week a little bit of an edge because they had that one game up. I still personally feel if they want to move forward with round 0, it needs to be a 9 match round with 18 teams. That's what I'm trying to say. Every team should be involved. Shouldn't be, let's throw 8 teams out there, let's only have 4 games, and we can have early buys, and they're going to benefit from that moving forward, because I still feel this buy structure early on is going to benefit the teams that were supposed to play round 1 or round 0. See, I'm getting confused with the rounds. All I'm trying to say is I think there is an underlying benefit to teams that play in round 0, not just because they get that extra game in and they can build match fitness, but these buys early are going to be critical to refreshing those bodies and coming back out and having a more influential game moving forward. Just my opinion. But Hawthorn managed to get the job done against Essendon by 26 points in a game where I felt Essendon did manage to wrestle momentum back at some points, but then Hawthorn would just come back firing and go whack. And in those affairs where you see a team hit the scoreboard and then start building self-belief, but then the opposition just like that can flip the switch and go and score straight away, that's exactly what Hawthorn were doing, and they were shutting down any momentum that Essendon was trying to build. It was an incredible performance from Hawthorn in many aspects. A lot of people saw them play against Sydney and thought that, you know, this could be a flash-in-the-pan moment. Can we really trust Hawthorn to be this uprising team this year that is going to do damage? And they came out and played the exact same way, didn't do much in changing their style up, and still managed to get the job done quite comfortably against Essendon. The midfield game was great to watch because players from Hawthorn, especially players like Jai Newcomb, were just flipping that switch when it come to centre clearances. And even though players like Jai Newcomb might not have had the best disposal efficiency for the game, I still feel their input was incredibly beneficial and influential around the contest. Players like Carl Amon, who I feel fly under the radar, have really stood up these opening 2 games for Hawthorn and really, you know, taken their mark. I still feel Battle and Barras in that defensive 50 is going to create what I perceive to be one of the best, if not the best, defensive 50s in the competition this year. James Sicily played a more defensive role, more so this round than last round, because last round we saw him float forward against Sydney and, you know, have a forward presence. But I feel the team of Sicily, Barras, and Battle are almost insurmountable when it comes to being able to get the ball past them, because all 3 of them are intercepting machines. And I feel that Hawthorn are very, very clever in the way they have hit the trade period this year, picking up these players. And it's not finished yet, folks, because Harley Reid has been tied to a potential move to Hawthorn when the time comes. Is Oscar Allen going to choose Hawthorn, or is Oscar Allen going to choose Brisbane? Question marks. But they're only going to get stronger. As for Essendon, on the flip side, I feel there were some players that didn't really live up to expectation. I mean, I don't understand how Jade Gresham, who has been targeted as one of these, you know, key components to the club, starts the game as a tactical sub. I don't understand it. That's a guy who, although he did come on and have immediate impact, this is somebody that you could have had out on the field having immediate impact at the start of the game when they needed it the most. Zach Merritt can only do so much off of his own boot. Mason Redman playing a midfield role early really put question marks everywhere for me, because young kids like Elijah Sartis had a really strong preseason, and this game saw him spend more often than not time on the bench because Scott had random players running through the midfield. I scratched my head about that quite a bit, and it's only going to get worse for Essendon moving forward because Kyle Langford has done a hamstring injury. We're going to see him miss 4 to 6 weeks. They lost Jake Stringer in the trade period. Peter Wright has aggravated an injury of some kind, so he's going to miss a few more weeks. They're dropping like flies in that forward line, and they can't really afford to rely on younger talent to get the job done on their own. You know, they've got Harrison Jones, who can play a forward role, but he's now playing up on the wing as a tall wingman, which, again, he's got the aerobic capacity to do it, but, I mean, can they afford having somebody that tall playing that role when they're now so short up forward? A lot of question marks around both teams. Hawthorn in good ways and how they can continue to run in a positive direction. Essendon in the way of what is going on with some of the decisions that are being made, and can they bounce back from this defeat, from a game that was very winnable, especially when players, as I said, are completely underperforming. A lot of question marks and questions indirectly are being asked about the acquisition of Ben Mackay at full back, taken in on a decent amount of money, has really failed to deliver, I feel, both early on this year and last year. Like, he was almost invisible on Friday night. Last year didn't really live up to the hype that a lot of people had put behind him. I don't know whether this has become a case of when he played for North Melbourne, because he didn't have that many good players around him defensively, he stood out. Now that he's moved to Essendon and you've got players like Redman, Ridley, all these type of players around him, he's kind of fading to the back a little bit because he might not actually be as good as what people perceived. I don't know. But a great win from Hawthorn, 2 from 2, sitting comfortably up the top of the ladder with GWS, which we'll get into later on in the video. And early, even though we're only 2 games into the pocket ride here, starting to show that this Hollywood Hawk kind of thing that's going on, this hawk ball, is something to be believed. Down at GMHBA Stadium on Saturday afternoon, we saw the first smacking of the round, and it came from a team who I have backed to be in this year's grand final, and if this one game is anything to go off, they should be sending shivers down the spine of every team in the competition. Geelong took on Fremantle, and I don't speak lightly of Fremantle. I've spoken quite openly about how I feel they're going to be one of the most improved clubs this year, and I've got them just finishing within the top 8, but they could be a top 4 contender. And I think I might have put the Moz on them because they got fucking obliterated by 78 points. This was a team who at three-quarter time was well and truly in the game. There was only 20-odd points difference between the two teams, and I thought we are going to get a cracking finish in the last quarter. I don't think Fremantle came out to play after that, because to put on another 50-odd points on the scoreboard to increase that deficit from 20-odd to 78, pushing 80 points, that's fucking ridiculous. That is unheard of. And there were some individual performances in this game on both sides that were incredible. But obviously, when you've got a team winning by almost 80 points, it's hard to kind of pay homage to the players from the opposition when they have performed. Angus Brayshaw, he used to play for Melbourne. He doesn't play anymore. But his brother Andrew, I thought, had a great game for Fremantle. Murphy Reid on debut for Fremantle didn't really do much, but there was a period of 4 minutes in the game where he kicked 4 goals. I'm not even kidding. It was like he had been on off mode, and then all of a sudden somebody flipped the switch and this bastard started popping off. He kicked 1 goal, 2 goal, 3 goal, 4. You saw the goal score sheet on screen, and it read, read. He is going to be a player, this kid. I don't know what role he plays. I know he's got aerobic capacity to be in the midfield, but Fremantle's midfield would be hard to crack into, so playing as a small forward probably will be where he's situated right now. But when you've got players to come back like Shea Bolton, who's going to play in that forward line, does Murphy keep that role? Do they shift him? I don't know. For Geelong, you just had a long list of players lining up. Max Holmes was doing Max Holmes things. Bailey Smith came out in his first game as a cat and was arguably best on ground. He was so slick, so smooth, you wouldn't have thought that he has missed 12 months of football with how he played. And I don't know whether that's glazing, because some people feel that it's not going to be a performance he's going to be able to back up. But he was definitely looking in good nick. We had players like Jeremy Cameron, who I predicted to win the Coleman. He comes out and kicks 4 goals. A really lazy day for Jeremy Cameron. Starting to really show that this forward line can function without the Tomahawk, especially when they put on 147 points on the scoreboard. That's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, Jack Henry in defence, 14 marks for the game. Sam De Koning, a guy that is a premiership defender, still finding his feet really in the game because he's still very young. Playing in the ruck, and I thought was probably the best ruckman on the field. He played an incredible game, and not just playing in the ruck, but he's almost playing as a midfielder in a ruck role because he's winning clearances and getting a lot of disposal. I think he had like 25 touches, so he had a really good game. There were a lot of players for Geelong that were so likeable and watchable. I mean, Brian Myers comes out and kicks a goal of the year contender, just as we'd expect him to come out and do. They were looking good. They were looking dangerous. I'm a little bit worried about how ballistic Geelong could go. I did say in my predictions video earlier, a couple of weeks ago, everybody seems to forget that while Sydney were on that hot streak last year and then they dropped that game to Richmond, Geelong were on that hot streak of not losing a game as well, and they've really kicked this year off strong. I don't know whether this is because Geelong are just so good or whether Fremantle were just terrible. It needs to be backed up. But, fuck, the Cats look great. Up at the SCG, Sydney, Brisbane, grand final rematch. We know how it went down last year. Brisbane walked away as premiers, and for a very long time in this game, they looked defeated. I thought Sydney were going to absolutely trump them. Early on, Sydney got a 3-4 goal jump, and I was thinking to myself, where was this last year in the grand final? Sydney have back-to-back grand finals now, almost really, come out in a fashion where they were expected to get up and do some damage and failed to do so. And I thought this was the game where they were going to find redemption. They might not walk away with the Premiership Cup, but they'll walk away with 4 Premiership points, and there might be a little bit of egg dished up on Brisbane's face for not being able to dish it up. And then Brisbane just decided they're going to turn it around and kick some fucking ass, and it was one of, I feel, the games of the round, given how close the finish was, and considering how it could have been a blowout at one point, because as I said, Sydney got to 3-4 goals out, and I thought Brisbane were going to struggle to claw that back. No Joe Danaher. Are they going to struggle to find avenue to score without him in the team? Jordan, was it Jordan? James Jordan? Yeah, it was James Jordan. Plays a lockdown role on Lachie Neale, where Lachie Neale had little to no influence in this game at all. So much so that when you look at the stats, so much so that I think Levi Ashcroft in his debut game had more influence on the field than Lachie Neale did. It's just lucky Brisbane have contingencies in place. Josh Dunkley was he just went absolutely fucking ballistic for Brisbane. Dane Zorko, absolutely off the charts. Berry had one of the best games for Brisbane I have seen him play in a very long time. There were some individual efforts from Brisbane that really went to a whole new level, especially, I think it was especially needed as well, given the fact that, as I said, Lachie Neale was down on input. Will Ashcroft, very average considering that the final series we just saw him put together at the back end of last year. No Joe Danaher, so we need players like Eric Hipwood to step up. I would have said Charlie Cameron needs to step up, but he was a late out, which forced Levi Ashcroft out of the sub vest and onto the field, and his performance should be enough to tell Fagan he doesn't need to be starting as sub. This kid needs to be getting game time into his legs. I personally feel free to discuss this with the comments with me down below, because I'll make this the question of the day. Do you think a debutant should start as tactical sub? I personally think it shouldn't be. A debut shouldn't be overshadowed by the fact that they might only play 10 minutes of football. You know, if they're lucky, someone might get injured, which is going to hamper the team, but will give you more game time. That shouldn't be the case. We saw over the course of the weekend, Collingwood, for example, use Scott Pendlebury as a sub. Unseen. Never heard of, but it happened. Jade Gresham for Essendon, starting sub. Richmond, Sonzi, instead of having 3 debutants, we had all 3 debutants on the field, starting. It was incredible to see so many teams go down that avenue, and I think if there was only one negative for Brisbane, it would have been that they were going into that game with potentially Levi Ashcroft as sub, and I'm glad they didn't do that route, because we got to see him and just go about his business, and he looks so good. I still feel, ultimately, when you put the Ashcroft boys together, Levi's going to be the better Ashcroft than Will. I'm going to go out on the early whim, and I'm going to say that. But a very hard-fought effort from Lions, who came out with a 4-point victory, and Sydney, on the other hand, have started their season 0-2. Not a good start. Marvel Stadium played host to the Bulldogs taking on North Melbourne. I was very silly. I tipped North Melbourne for this game. I thought, no Bontempelli, no Jamara Ugle-Hagan. Still a little bit of question marks around Ed Richards. No Adam Treloar. Can they get the job done? Yeah, they did. They really did. And it's no discredit to North Melbourne, because North Melbourne almost kicked 100 points on their own. So they had a great outing. Nick Larkey kicked 5 goals. Jai Simpkin had a huge game. Harry Sheezel did Harry Sheezel things. But it wasn't enough to keep the Bulldogs' momentum down. Bailey Dale comes back in after an injury-riddled pre-season. He comes out, one of the best on ground. Ed Richards, one of the best on ground. Tom Liberatore, one of the best on ground. Let's start throwing names around. Joel Frazier moves to a defensive role and has looked like he has found himself at home in that position. Don't need Jamarra Ugle-Hagan to be kicking goals because these midfielders were trying to find goals within each other. It was a really strong team effort by both teams. And at one point, again, this was a game that was only a couple of kicks in it. Could have fallen either side. It was a great watch. And when Bulldogs started kicking away, I could kind of feel the, not just the momentum, but the attitude of North Melbourne kind of dropping a little bit. It was a little bit disheartening to watch because you've got a couple of players who were trying to go about their thing and get their team over the line, but you could see that morale was dropping. That's the word I was looking for. Morale was starting to drop a little bit, and when you've got only a handful of players in a team that is still trying to push through, a little bit concerning. But again, this is still a very young North Melbourne team. You know, they brought in Caleb Daniel, they brought in Luke Parker, they brought in Jack Darling. I feel they all did their jobs for what they've been brought in to do. But when you've got all these young kids around them still trying to find their feet, and Bulldogs obviously coming in with I feel a much more accomplished list when you look at the players all around the field, you know, all Australians and all that kind of stuff. It almost seems like a one-sided affair, and I really give credit to North Melbourne for sticking in the fight until the end of the game. They're still going to be held in great stead. North Melbourne are on the way up. Their trajectory is only going to go in that direction, you know what I'm saying? So, great watch for both teams. Unfortunate that obviously one team needs to walk away with a loss. The Bulldogs, though, I'm still not openly convinced because they still will not have Marcus Bontempelli for 5 weeks. We don't know when Jamarra Ugle-Hagan's coming back. Treloar is still set to miss a few rounds more, so he'll come back into circulation. But we've seen more often than not in the past, Marcus Bontempelli has been that required piece to get the Bulldogs over the line. Can the Bulldogs sustain it without having Marcus Bontempelli there? Will there still be inner turmoil going on with how selection and pieces are moved because of the Luke Beveridge effect? We don't know. But Bulldogs pick up the win in a game where I probably should have tipped them, but I gave North Melbourne benefit of the doubt. I thought they'd get the job done. I'm still not writing North Melbourne off. I still feel that they could potentially finish outside of the top 4 this year, which would be, again, a huge step for them as a club. But the Bulldogs currently sitting in 8th position without arguably one of the best players in the competition in their side. So, doing really good for themselves after round 1. We were then dished up another belting, and it was one that I honestly didn't see coming. I thought this game was going to be a hell of a lot closer, especially given how Collingwood performed the week earlier against GWS. But they came out against Port Adelaide at the MCG and won this game by 91 points. This was fucking insane. This was a game where Collingwood were just kicking goal after goal after goal, and I was wondering, you know, should we call a medic because this bleeding isn't going to fucking stop? When are they going to stop scoring? 136-45. This is alarming for Port Adelaide, and a lot of people are saying, oh, it's okay, they'll bounce back. This is telling me that they are more dependent on missing pieces in this team than they are letting on. No Zach Butters in this team. I mean, they had Horn Francis in the middle. He played a very lackluster game of football, given the fact that he's got opportunity now for more minutes in the midfield. Connor Rozee popped off like a champion, as you'd expect. Ollie Wines, rinding back? He was rinding back the clock, ladies and gentlemen, and one of the best performances I've seen him play since his Brownlow year. And a lot of people seem to forget Ollie Wines did win a Brownlow. I'm still shocked by that fact, but he won a Brownlow, and he put in a Brownlow vote consistent performance in a team that got smashed, so he's probably not going to even get recognised for his performance. Connor Rozee might not even get a vote in this game, and he absolutely went nuts. I just don't understand where this came from. I don't know whether this is because we saw Nick Dacos so down in round 0 due to all that cramping, and then he comes out this week fit and firing, and Collingwood, I don't know. I don't know whether there's any connection between the two, but this was so impressive from Collingwood, and this backed up my theory in my prediction video that a functioning forward line for Collingwood is going to get them over the line this year and have them playing finals football. Because when you look at the individual efforts from these guys that they've now built this forward line around, you can't argue that, you know, what I'm saying is false. Because Tim Membry, brought in from St Kilda, kicks 4 goals, 1. Brodie Myercheck kicks 3 straight. Dan McStay kicks 3 goals too. Braden Maynard out of defence kicks 2 goals. Absolutely unheard of. Bobby Hill kicks 2. Jamie Elliott kicks 2. Steel Sidebottom. Lockie Schultz. Patrick Lipinski. Nick Dacos. All these midfielders and players that play a little bit higher up the field all getting involved in the game as well. But when you've got your main 3 kicking 4, 3 and 3, you're looking at what? 7, 10 goals between your 3 mainstay players. This is a forward line that can take Collingwood to the promised land. I genuinely believe that, because Dan McStay has a great set of hands. He is a marking machine. Tim Membry has a great set of hands. Marking machine. You want me to break it up? Tim Membry took 10 marks for the game. Dan McStay, he took 7 of those marks. It just blows my mind that they had this available last week and got blown out of the water by GWS. Again, I don't know whether last week was just an abnormality for Collingwood. I don't know whether, they genuinely just rely too much on Nick Dacos, and because Nick Dacos was injured, they couldn't get the job done. On the flip side, Port Adelaide, again, no Charlie Dixon in that forward line because he's now retired. He was their number 1 go-to man. Jeremy Finlayson, now playing in defensive 50. They lose somebody who's got a great set of hands and is rather accurate in front of goal. Todd Marshall now needs to be relied on. Mitch Georgiades now needs to be relied on. These are players that sometimes find themselves on the out through injury or have some inconsistencies creep in their game. At one point, Todd Marshall was one of the players in the AFL that you'd put your house on to kick a goal. And he went through a stretch of incredible inaccuracy, which goes against his character as a footballer. It just... Don't know what's happening with Port. I don't know whether the absence of Zach Butters being that accumulative machine in the midfield is having a similar effect to Sydney not having Errol Goulden out on the wing, and just his ball use is too pivotal to them being able to move forward. I don't know, but this was very ugly for Port Adelaide. So much so that Port Adelaide is sitting currently at the bottom of the ladder with the worst percentage. I think they got something like 33% or something like that. It was bad. But Collingwood, they were up and about. I'm surprised there weren't riots in the street of Melbourne and shit was set on fire. That's how fucking good they went. Let's continue the smackings moving into Sunday, shall we? Because of the 3 games that were played, only one of them come down to a kick. The other ones came down to several. The first of which was Adelaide hosting St Kilda at Adelaide Oval. Adelaide is a team this year that I have predicted to be just outside of the top 8, but I have openly said numerous times, they are one of those teams that will be there about for 6th, 7th, 8th position. And they've done themselves a good service to start their season off because they won by 63 points, 135, defeating St Kilda's 72. Actually surprised St Kilda managed to kick a winnable score with 72 points, given they had no king up forward. They don't have Membry up forward anymore. They were reliant on some newcomers into the team to do their job. Jack McRae in the midfield showed us all that Luke Beveridge should have been playing the bastard as an inside midfielder last year at the Bulldogs and not fucking floating him up forward and sending him as a tactical sub and making him play in the VFL. Comes out and has 35 odd touches and I feel was the most influential player for St Kilda. But again, is going to be overshadowed because St Kilda got absolutely belted around the ground. From an Adelaide team that didn't just rely on senior players. This was an outfit that had a lot of youth standing up tall, and it was players that are starting to become synonymous with putting in games that are not many people give enough credit to, and I think a lot of these players fly under the radar and are really underrated. Jake Saligo, one of those players, 29 touches. Let's have 8 marks with that. Let's kick a goal. Matt Crouch spent so much time in the sandful. It is ridiculous. He comes out and has 31. He has four tackles. He has 7 clearances. He'll kick a goal, no worries. Rory Laird moves back to defence. 29 touches. He has 7 marks. He has 4 tackles. Isaac Rankin goes absolutely ballistic. Kicks 2, has 28. Let's have 7 clearances. Let's throw in 5 tackles as well. Jordan Dawson played a predominant forward role this week. Not a role that we're used to seeing him play too often. He still manages to notch up 27 touches, has 9 marks, lays 4 tackles, kicked 2 goals too. This is a team that I feel a lot of people are underrating this year. I think a lot of people laugh off the fact when people say, I think Adelaide can play finals this year. They think you're telling a joke. I don't think it's a fucking joke at this point. We're only one round in, and I know it is the early crow, we're loading the gun early, but this is a team that showed that the only reason they haven't played finals, or at least last year, was their inconsistency in being able to follow games through. Losing close games, being blown out in games they shouldn't be. If they've got the right mindset this year, and they really flip the script, they can be the unsung heroes of the 2025 season when it comes to how teams perform. Something that really resonates with me was Adam Uze's press conference after the Richmond Carlton game, and he turned around and said that the biggest implementation of anything that they have done on the off-season was overcoming the mental battle, the mental mind, the mindset, overcoming all the external noise, all the pressures put on you as a player, all the expectations. Obviously Richmond coming into this year, no surprise that, all the media experts are saying they're not going to win a game. They've lost all of their talent. They're going to be useless. This is the worst season we're going to see. And they really worked on blocking that out and overcoming the mental game. And I think that played a lot into their win. They're 41 points down. Richmond of old would have dropped their heads. Flipping that mental switch, they found belief within themselves, and that belief kept running through. This is what Adelaide can do. If they flip that mental switch, if they start believing they can win these games, they can find consistency, you will start seeing more influential performances from players. You'll be seeing a more, contuitive overall performance from Adelaide. It was a really great outing for them, especially given St Kilda, I feel, even though they got smacked, a lot of people can argue that St Kilda and Adelaide are probably matched when it comes to their more elite talent. So on paper, these teams are kind of even on where they could be finishing here, because St Kilda have pulled upsets out of their ass before. We've seen them play consistent football, but this drop-off was huge. And I think maybe saying that St Kilda might be a bottom four this team, holy shit, me and I really got to stop recording these videos so late at night. What I'm trying to say is my prediction of St Kilda possibly finishing in the bottom four this year might come to fruition given the performance and lack thereof that we saw on the weekend. We saw Melbourne host GWS at the MCG in the pouring down rain in a game that was won with less than 40 seconds on the clock. And as a Richmond man, I got PTSD when Lachie Whitfield kicked that ball in from full back with less than a minute on the clock. This was a game that Melbourne and GWS had arm wrestled back and forth, and with less than a minute to go, Melbourne get a behind on the board, and it is a 3-point ball game. Let me paint the scene. Lachie Whitfield has ball in hand. He's ready to go down the line. The commentator's already saying, we know GWS are just going to go long down the middle. Going into this game, I said on my SUPERCOACH video, Max Gawn was going to go huge because he was only going up against Lachie Keefe. And Lachie Keefe takes a mark inside forward 50 for GWS. Couple of players running past him, so he could have passed it off, but he thought, you know what? I'm going to settle it down. I'm going to go back and kick a goal. This is a player that has been at a number of clubs. This is a player who really hasn't kicked many goals in his career. Leading up to this point, he had only kicked 19 goals, so, could he potentially go back and kick this one? He's not a known goal kicker. The goal umpire did not have to move. He put it through the middle. He kicks goal number 20 for his career, and arguably, maybe not even arguably, maybe easily, the best goal he has kicked in his career, because it got GWS over the line by 3 points in a thriller. And it's not without credit to Melbourne, because Melbourne had so many players stand up tall. Christian Petrarca comes back for his first game of the year after an injury-riddled season at the end of last year, almost like he was never injured, fit and firing. Oliver slowly built into the game, but you could see he's starting to come back to his best. Max Gawn still had better of the ruck duel all game. And, they should have easily won this game by a hell of a lot more, given the fact when you compare the two ruckmen, Gawn was feeding Melbourne first use of the ball for most of the game. It's still, I think, that hodgepodge forward line for Melbourne that isn't functioning all too well. I do have to give Melbourne credit where it's due. And even though they lost this game, I think the biggest positive for them is the amount of youngsters they had play. And not really youngsters, because they have some mature age recruits as well. But I believe they had 5 debutants take to the field in this game, which is more than what Richmond had. Richmond have just rebuilt through a huge draft haul and only had 3 debutants out there playing. Melbourne came in with 5, and I feel each of those, when given their moments, had critical moments in the game that where they really stood tall. One of them kicked a couple of snags. They were getting plenty of the ball. Lindsay on the wing looked so crisp. I'm actually upset that Xavier Lindsay didn't slip to one of Richmond's later picks, because I would have loved to have picked him up as an outside wingman. He will end up getting a Rising Star nomination within the next few weeks. He's going to be something for Melbourne. Harvey Langford started as the sub, which I, again, feel a little bit disgruntled about given the fact that he's debuting, but when given the chance, he looked okay. GWS just managed to find a way to dig deep. We've seen GWS in this position many times. They know how to get it done. Tom Green comes back into this lineup after missing round 0, has 35 odd possessions. You know, everyone thought, can Finn Callahan back up a huge round 0 when Tom Green's back? He had 31, I'm pretty sure. Toby Green comes out and kicks 3 or 4 goals. They were looking great, and this is still a forward line not functioning with Jake Stringer, not functioning with Jesse Hogan. They are missing 2 sharpshooters, especially Jesse Hogan coming off of a Coleman medal. So the fact that they can dig deep, they're still kicking winning scores, they still look great when moving the ball forward. The Orange Tsunami is still very much a threat when they get that half back to half forward role moving. Still very disappointed that we let Adam Kingsley go as a coach and we didn't keep him around at Richmond, because I think he'd be doing great things with this young list. But that being said, Melbourne dropped their first game of the year, just so close to getting over the line, while GWS currently sit on top of the ladder with 2 wins under the belt from 2. Is this the year for GWS fans to finally hold that Premiership Cup aloft? We know we've only seen them make the grand final once, and they got absolutely smacked by Richmond, and they'll be ruining and stewing and brewing many things over that missed opportunity. So this could very well be the year that they bounce back, and they've given me some belief after seeing how they've performed the first 2 weeks. And the final game of the round not only saw a blowout, but saw a history-making blowout for the winning team. I honestly thought West Coast could win at home, given Gold Coast track record away from home. Gold Coast won this game by 87 points, which is the largest winning margin they have ever had as a club since joining the competition. And that worries me, even though it was, some can say, only against West Coast. You give these bastards some belief up at the Gold Coast and they'll start winning games. And if we see Gold Coast in a position to play finals and make the grand final, I might throw up. That's all I'm trying to say. It speaks volumes for West Coast. And I know they're missing Elliot Yeo, they're missing Dom Sheed, they've got some injuries here and there. But when their best 2 performers on the field were Liam Baker and Jack Graham, who've just stepped out of Richmond and moved over to West Coast, I feel you've got problems. When you're heavily reliant on these newcomers coming in and they're being your best players around this list that you've been building for years, very big question marks now starting to pop up. And, you know, you've got Harley Reid. Generational talent, they said. One of the best in the competition, they said he'll be. He's going to be the first $2 million man. More worried about trying to fucking start verbal arguments and fights on the field than winning a contest and flopping for free kicks. It was an ugly watch in so many aspects. You've got a player like Harley Reid who has all the talent in the competition that he ever wanted, and he wants to waste that over bullshit and not worried about winning a hardball and wanting to start spot fires, showing fight verbally out of his fucking mouth, but doesn't want to show fight when it's out on the field. You know, Jeremy McGovern battled hard. I felt Ruben Jinby in defence has really started to find his feet, and he battled on well. As I said, Jack Graham, Liam Baker, arguably Richmond's best 2, arguably West Coast best 2. So much so that a good friend of mine is a West Coast supporter, and he thanked me for Liam Baker coming over, because Liam Baker at one point was the only one showing anything for West Coast. On the flip side, Gold Coast were just, you know, off of the back of some of the performances we've seen in the past, they were an abnormality. That's how good they were. Ben King comes out. A lot of people saying he might win the Coleman this year, and I thought they were laughing. He comes out and kicks 6 goals round 1. 6 goals against West Coast when they've got players like Jeremy McGovern fucking still in the back 6. I don't know whether Tom Barrass not being in that West Coast backline is going to hurt them more than they cared to admit. I think that very well may be the case. You could see there were defensive holes left because of that lack of interceptability from Barrass. I mean, you put Barras on King. I don't think King kicks 6. Noah Anderson, 30-plus possessions. Matt Rowell, 30-plus possessions. Tuke Miller got back into the swing of Tuke Miller things. Dan Rioli, half-back for the Gold Coast. I was about to say for Richmond. I'm still trying to get used to these players not being with Richmond anymore. He kicks 2 goals off of half-back. Starting to show that when Damien Hardwick arrived at the Gold Coast and said we're only a few components away from our premiership team, is John Noble and Dan Rioli off of half-back really those key components that they were looking for? Because they looked good. I mean, Jared Witts had a great game. And you could probably argue, yeah, okay, they only played against West Coast, not really some great ruckman to come up against. And again, this is something that we need to ask questions of, similarly to other teams that won in emphatic ways over the weekend. Can the Gold Coast back this up against other teams that aren't predicted to be bottom 4? Can they do this against teams that are going to be competing, you know, within the final system this year? But it's hard to argue as much as it pains me. Gold Coast look good this weekend. They were actually one of the better teams over the course of the weekend, and I didn't think I would ever say that in a conversation. So, West Coast supporters, not going to say alarm bells, but I'd say there's a lot of internal questions that need to be answered. Like, okay, they've got a brand new coach in McQualter. They're getting used to a new game plan. It's going to take a bit of time. I can understand that, but you don't want to be coming out round 1 and losing by almost 100 points. Given the fact that we've only had 2 rounds of football, one of which only had 4 teams going, you know, head-to-head in 2 different games, but this is how the ladder looks heading into round 2. We have the GWS Giants and Hawthorn sitting in 1st and 2nd position, tied on 8 points, both teams undefeated. From 3rd through to 9th, each team has won a game, which means they're all technically tied for 3rd. But we have, by percentage, Gold Coast in 3rd, Geelong in 4th, Adelaide in 5th, Collingwood in 6th, Richmond in 7th, and the Bulldogs in 8th, with Brisbane just out of the top 8 sitting in 9th. As far as the rest of the teams that haven't won a game, we have Melbourne in 10th, Sydney in 11th, North Melbourne in 12th, Carlton in 13th, Essendon in 14th, and our first bottom 4 for the year is St Kilda in 15th, Fremantle in 16th, West Coast in 17th, and Port Adelaide in 18th position. And with all the formalities out of the way, we can now dive into the Hip and Shoulders MVP award for the 2025 season. And we're going to go through each of those games and dish out my 3, 2, 1 votes. Similar to how the Brownlow runs, you know, best on ground gets 3 votes, then second best gets 2, then 1 vote to the third best on ground. And it's very tentative, it's very, you know, objective, given it's my point of view. So there are going to be players that miss. You know, I sometimes can justify a player in a losing team getting the 3 votes if they performed well. Some players might be in a losing team and had a great game but just miss out because I think somebody performed better. That's why I've brought in the Hip and Shoulder Team of the Week this year, because there are going to be some players this round that are going to miss out on votes, but should be recognised in some way, shape or form. So I'm going to be doing a Team of the Week every week, and then at the end of the year, do my Team of the Year. Not necessarily, well, it would be All-Australian, really. So yeah, choosing my own All-Australian team, you know, not just based off of the players that get nominated by the AFL, but doing our own one that we can base off of what we feel and the votes we've given. So just again, as I said at the top of the video, another way for us to get a little bit more personable in the comments and have a chat about it and throw my flair around per se with, you know, players who I think are deserving more so than others. So yeah, it's that time. Let's get it. For the Richmond-Carlton game, I want to give honourable mentions to Toby Nankervis, Tim Taranto, and Tom De Conning, all of which could have easily gotten a 1 vote here. And I'm giving it to a player who surprisingly didn't get any coaches' votes from this game. I'm giving it to Sam Lawler, the Rising Star nominee. I thought he had as comprehensive a debut as I have seen from anyone. And when you look at just the way he composed himself with the ball, more often than not when he had it in his hands, he was involved in a scoring chain. He was helping somebody hit the scoreboard. He was electric. He was great. He had 18 disposals, which can be broken down into 6 kicks and 12 handballs, of which he ran at 77.8% disposal efficiency. Took 2 marks, laid 2 tackles, 181 metres gained. You're not going to expect much when his handballs were in close, but he kicked 2 goals of his own, 8 score involvements, a NAB Rising Star Award, and a cheeky little dick poking out of the bottom of the shorts, which now confirms Sam Lawler doesn't wear any underwear. Or maybe he was running that hot they burnt off, who knows. But hey, he was hot, he was on the field, and he was on under the pants, you know what I'm saying? The 2 votes I am going to give to Patrick Cripps. I felt, even though Carlton lost, he was very influential on the game. I'm actually very impressed with Camden McIntosh and the fact that they ran him with Patrick Cripps and kind of, in moments, was able to shut down his influence, because we know how Patrick Cripps can go when he's up and about. He still managed to have 32 disposals, which can be broken down into 10 kicks and 22 handballs. He had 2 marks, laid 5 tackles, 9 clearances, and 216 metres gained. And my 3 votes, I spoke about him earlier, but I'm giving it to Jack Ross. He had 28 disposals, 10 kicks and 22 handballs, took 5 marks, laid 4 tackles, had 7 clearances, 591 metres gained, 5 inside 50s, and I believe he kicked 2 goals, maybe he kicked the one. I know he hit the scoreboard at least once, and he looked great doing it too. Hawthorn versus Essendon, I have decided to give the 1 vote to Jai Newcomb. 25 disposals broken down into 20 kicks and 5 handballs. Don't let the 52% disposal efficiency fool you as well, because I still feel he was very influential on this game. Took 3 marks, had 3 tackles, 7 clearances, 449 metres gained, if you don't mind. The 2 votes I'm giving to somebody I faded in round 0, but I'm definitely not missing out on votes this week for this guy, Carl Amon. He's put together 2 games back-to-back that are incredibly strong. 28 disposals, which can be broken down into 21 kicks and 7 handballs. He ran at just under 93% disposal efficiency for 28 disposals. That is insane. 10 marks, 2 tackles, 643 metres gained. And best on ground, even though they lost, I can't look past the effort of this bloke. I'm giving it to Jai Caldwell. 36 disposals, which can be broken down into 18 kicks and 18 handballs, 4 marks, 11 tackles, 10 clearances, 476 metres gained, and kicked a major as well. For Geelong versus Fremantle, I have landed on Jack Henry for the 1 vote. 24 disposals, 20 kicks and 4 handballs, 14 marks, 1 tackle, and 246 metres gained. The 2 vote goes to Max Holmes. 24 disposals, 16 kicks and 8 handballs, 4 marks, 5 tackles, 7 clearances, 406 metres gained, and 2 goals, with best on ground, as I touched on before, going to Bailey Smith. 32 disposals, broken down to 19 kicks and 13 handballs, 5 marks, 5 tackles, 7 clearances, 693 metres gained, and 1 goal. Sydney versus Brisbane. I have Isaac Heaney for the 1 vote. I could have given it to many other players, but I really feel out of all the Sydney players, he stood out the most to me. 23 disposals, 14 kicks, 9 handballs, 7 marks, 2 tackles, 5 clearances, 393 metres gained, and 2 goals. The 2 vote goes to Dane Zorko. 24 disposals, broken down into 20 kicks and 4 handballs, 6 marks, 3 tackles, 555 metres gained, and he kicked 2 goals, with best on ground easily and comfortably going to Josh Dunkley. 27 disposals, 17 kicks and 10 handballs, 5 marks, 10 tackles, 6 clearances, 614 metres gained, and 1 goal. Western Bulldogs versus North Melbourne. I have Nick Larkey being stiff with 5 goals missing. I know that is huge, but when you see the players I have picked, I think they speak for themselves collectively. The 1 vote I am giving to Jai Simpkin. 30 disposals, 19 kicks and 11 handballs, 4 marks, 7 tackles, 4 clearances, 407 metres gained, and 1 goal. The 2 vote goes to Ed Richards. 30 disposals, 18 kicks and 12 handballs, 2 marks, 2 tackles, 7 clearances, 611 metres gained, and 1 goal, with best on ground for me going to Bailey Dale. 29 disposals, 22 kicks and 7 handballs, 3 marks, 1 tackle, 1 clearance, 558 metres gained, and 2 goals won, playing off of half-back. Collingwood versus Port Adelaide. I have given the 1 vote to Daniel McStay, who had 21 disposals, 10 kicks and 11 handballs, 7 marks, 5 tackles, 10 hit-outs, 3 clearances, 252 metres gained, and 3 goals too. The 2 vote goes to Connor Rozee, although in the losing team was pivotal in this game. 35 disposals, 19 kicks, 16 handballs, 3 marks, 4 tackles, 5 clearances, and 680 metres gained. The 3 vote for me up against his old team, Dan Houston, off of half back. 27 disposals, 14 kicks, 13 handballs, 2 marks, 5 tackles, 1 clearance, and 287 metres gained. Adelaide versus St Kilda. The 1 vote goes to Jordan Dawson. 27 disposals, 24 kicks, 3 handballs, 9 marks, 4 tackles, 2 clearances, 648 metres gained, 2 goals, and 2 behinds. The 2 vote goes to Jake Saligo. 29 disposals, 16 kicks and 13 handballs, 3 marks, 8 tackles, 5 clearances, 549 metres gained, and the 1 goal. And the man of the match, 3 votes, Isaac Rankin. 28 disposals, 10 kicks, 18 handballs, 3 marks, 5 tackles, 7 clearances, 332 metres gained, with 2 goals won. Melbourne versus GWS. In the 1 vote, I have Toby Green. 23 disposals, 16 kicks, 7 handballs, 5 marks, 4 tackles, 5 clearances, 472 metres gained, and 3 goals 3. The 2 vote goes to Christian Petrarca. 27 disposals, 13 kicks and 14 handballs, 2 marks, 3 tackles, 4 clearances, 518 metres gained, and 2 goals 1, with Tom Green getting man of the match with 3 votes. 35 disposals, 14 kicks and 21 handballs, 1 mark, 4 tackles, 9 clearances, 545 metres gained, and 1 goal 1. And the final game of the round, West Coast versus the Gold Coast. The 1 vote goes to Ben King. 11 disposals, 8 kicks and 3 handballs, 8 marks, 117 metres gained, with 6 goals 2 on return. The 2 vote goes to Matt Rowell. Must have had some good grass today. 30 disposals, 17 kicks and 13 handballs, 8 tackles, 10 clearances, 465 metres gained, with Noah Anderson receiving the 3 votes. 36 disposals, 16 kicks and 20 handballs, 3 marks, 5 tackles, 9 clearances, and 723 metres gained. And obviously nobody breaking away individually yet. We have groups in both the 3, 2 and 1 vote sections, but with time, that'll change. Now it's time for my inaugural team of the week, and I was very selective when putting this team together because I've seen teams done by SEN, which had players like Ben Miller and Nick Vlosten in this team, and while I would have, liked to have had somebody like a Ben Miller in here because he did a great job, I feel he only played a half on Harry Mackay. It doesn't make sense to me for him to be in there. I feel there were other players that they kind of faded in certain positions that had better games overall than other players from certain teams. And again, there are going to be winning teams in here that might only have 1 or 2 players named. They might not even have a player named. Some players might be missing out here. So, I can't, you can't win them all. That's all I'm trying to say. This again is objective. So if you agree, if you disagree, feel free to sound off in the comment section down below. That's what it's all about. In my defensive 50, I have Dan Houston and Nick Vlosten in the back pockets with Jacob Wietering at full back. Across my half back line, I have Dane Zorko and Lockie Whitfield on the half back flanks with Jack Henry at centre half back. Across the middle, I've got Bailey Smith and Isaac Rankin on either wing, with Josh Dunkley playing in the centre. Toby Green and Darcy Fogarty make up my half-forward flanks, with Jeremy Cameron at centre half-forward, with Daniel McStay and Tim Membry forming my forward pockets, with Ben King playing out a full forward. A very tall forward line, I know, but hey, they were all kicking bags, so they all deserve to get in on the action. Toby Nankervis is my ruck for this week's team of the week. Noah Anderson is playing ruck rover, and Tom Green is in at rover. My bench sees Jai Caldwell, Jack Ross, Nick Larkey and Max Holmes enter the fray, with Carl Amon from Hawthorn being the sub. Now, I don't know whether I should be making the sub role somebody who actually played as a sub. If that was the case, probably looking at someone like a Jade Gresham or a Scott Pendlebury. However, Carl Amon had a huge game. I really wanted to get him into the team. I didn't know how else to do so, so he's taking the sub slot. And for the coaching role, I've given it to Adam Uze. Could have gone to a couple of other coaches, but I feel given the circumstances of Richmond coming into this game and how the game went about and how the outcome fell, very comfortable to put him in this role. And that is it for this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. I'm really enjoying doing these, involving things like Team of the Week and getting back into the vote system again. Really gets me up and about because as I've stated numerous times on this channel, I watch every game, every weekend, every round. So being able to transfer what I've seen and my knowledge of the game and my passion for the game into a platform like this, I'm absolutely loving it. Before we leave, I need to thank you all. This channel has just surpassed its first 100 subscribers, and that might not be big to some, but I've always felt, especially as someone that has been on YouTube for 7 or 8 years now, comfortably doing my gaming stuff, the first 100 subscribers I feel is the hardest hill to climb, and I'm so glad we've already surpassed that, and I'm glad you guys have gotten on board. I'm looking at doing bigger and better things moving forward, so if you have a love for our great game of AFL, do jump on board this community. I appreciate everybody that turns out, everybody that watches, everybody that leaves a like, everybody that leaves a comment. Thank you all so much. This round's in the books. Round 2 will be coming up. I will be getting my tips out hopefully later today, if not tomorrow morning. And there will be a SUPERCOACH update video as well, where I'm going to be burning a boost already and doing 3 trades after round 1. It's unprecedented, but I fucked up choosing some pods and I've made a mistake, so I need to do some corrections. So stay tuned for that. And not only that, if you've got any ideas for any AFL-based content you would like to see, leave a comment down below as well and let me know. You can also check me out on social media. Those links are all linked in the description. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.